was raised in Southern California, and in Los Angeles County, it is so dense from a population perspective that you could live your entire life there and really not come in contact with Christians. And that's the way I grew up. I didn't know any Christians. There were no Christians in our family. My dad's a very stubborn atheist, and I'm very close to my dad. I've been doing the same work that he did. He was at our agency for 28 years. I followed him. I was there 25. My son's been there about 8. So we've been at the same agency for 58 years. And I just followed in his footsteps. Didn't know any Christians. Now, my wife was raised as more of a cultural Catholic, but she had no idea she didn't own a Bible. But when we started having kids, she said, should we bring our kids to church? I'm like, no. She says, well, we should at least expose them to this. I said, well, if you want, I'll be happy to go. My dad will go to church with you. He thinks it's a very useful delusion. He thinks it has useful principles for raising kids. I thought, okay, I'll do that too. I'd be happy to do that. So I went to church with her, and I sat in an evangelical church for the first time for anything other than a wedding or a funeral. And this pastor was clever enough to say that Jesus was the smartest man who ever lived. And I thought, he even said that upon the teaching of Jesus of Nazareth, maybe in 1 or 2 sermons, all of Western civilization has been founded. I thought, that's not true. So I bought a Bible. I spent $6 on a Pew Bible. Okay, I didn't want to spend a lot of money on this. And I started to read through it to see if that was, I want to get the wisdom statement, the red words, the red letters of Jesus. What did he really say that was so darn smart? And as I realized this, I said, as I'm reading through it, it struck me that it resembled the kinds of eyewitness accounts I worked, especially in cold cases. I don't have access to the original eyewitnesses. Sometimes 35 years later, they're dead. I don't even have access to the people who wrote the reports about the original eyewitnesses because those guys are dead. So I'm looking at reports of eyewitness accounts in which I have no access to the eyewitness or the report writer. What's that sound like to you? Those are the Gospels. So I'm reading through this and I thought, wow, this actually has a texture that I was intrigued by. So I started to investigate this using the template that I know I use to determine if eyewitnesses are reliable. I even use something called forensic statement analysis. We have bad guys actually write out, when I interview them, I'll have them take a piece of paper on one side only, 12 lines, sometimes 24, and they'll have a pen, and they write out everything they did on the day of the murder from the time they woke up to the time they went to bed. And I will analyze that looking for deception indicators. How they compress time, how they expand time, how they use pronouns, how they use tenses and verbs. And I'm looking for things, adjectives and adverbs are really important. Optional words are really important. And I'll use that process to determine if they're lying to me before we even have the interview. At least I'll know what I have to focus on in the interview. So I started to use forensic statement analysis on the Gospels to see if I could find the deception that I'm expecting to find. In the end, I realized this is a reliable account of Jesus of Nazareth. And it bothered me. But I found myself compelled to, and I was delighted to find that Jesus of Nazareth is an incredibly evidential person. We are not asked to believe this blindly. You recognize that Jesus would go into towns and he would heal before he would herald. Ever notice that? You heal first, then you start preaching. Why? Because he said in John, if you don't believe the words that I just gave you, at least believe on the evidence of the miracles I worked in front of you. That evidence demonstrated, they attested to his divinity. That's an evidential approach. John the Baptist sends his disciples to Jesus because John is now in captivity, he's in custody, and he wants to know, is Jesus the one? So he sends his disciples to Jesus. And when the men had come to him, they said, John the Baptist has sent us to you, saying, are you the coming one? Or do we look for another? Imagine Jesus is listening to this from John. This is what I would have said. Really? John, my cousin, wants to know this? John, the guy who leapt in the womb when our mothers met? John, the one who baptized me and saw the Spirit of God descend on me at the baptism? That's the guy. He saw them. John, the one who sent all of you guys to me? You realize, by the way, all of your guys are with me now, okay? You 3 guys are coming from John are the last ones over there, okay? Everybody else is over here. This is the guy who wants to know if I'm the one? Remember, when you're talking about a detective, you're not just listening to what people say to you, but what they could say but don't. So I'm thinking, what could Jesus say in response to this? He could say, tell John he needs to pray about this. He needs to have a little more faith. That's not what he does. You know what he does, right? It says right here, at that very hour, he cured many of infirmities, afflictions, and evil spirits, and to many blind he gave sight. Then he said, go back and tell John what you just saw. That's an evidentialist. Well, I was at a Boise event about 3 weeks ago, big campus event. We're showing the evidence for Christianity, and someone in the very back of the room raised their hand. She stood up. She said, okay, you told us all that evidence, but can you just share your testimony? And here's what I told her. I said, you know what? People ask me that all the time, and I'm just going to tell you right now, my testimony does not matter, and either does yours. Here's what matters. Is it true? And can I demonstrate that it's true by talking about the evidence for it?
Actually have a little series on his book, Cold Case Christianity. I'll include a link to that playlist along with the original video. Of course, he is one of 59 former atheists featured on this channel who, once again, were once atheists, and then they examined the evidence for Christianity. He gets into a lot of forensic evidence and just fascinating details which debunk the atheist myth. The myth that there was no Jesus. The myth that there is no evidence for Christianity. The myth that Christianity is a myth. So I think that you all will enjoy that series. And if you're not familiar with any of the work of Homicide Detective J. Warner Wallace, I don't know what you're waiting for, man. There's free resources that he has available on this book online. It's a playlist I got, just features some excerpts from it. Oh man, the evidence for Christianity is just so overwhelming. You know, I'm more confident that Christ rose than I am that I exist. So Christ is King of Kings, Lord of Lords. Every knee will bow. Absolutely.